The path to become a software developer is something that takes time, and studying actually any topic is something that takes time and requires some plan. We need a blueprint. We need also persistence, but more than that, we need a plan and a blueprint before we start. Let's take, for example, the path to become a front-end developer. The path starts with the same building block that would drive someone to become a backend developer with the CS fundamentals. You may ask, but why do I need the CS fundamentals? Because they would solidify your ability to handle problems. Because you see, software developers are not merely software developers, they are problem solvers. And computer science is dealing with algorithms. And algorithms is the basic and the foundation for problem solving. So the basics of CS that I would recommend anyone who is trying to study either front-end development or back-end development is the CS fundamentals, which are the algorithms, the searching algorithms, the graph algorithms, the big O notations, and basically practicing solving such small problems. Also, mathematics is a very good foundation, especially statistics, calculus, and linear algebra. Those are the foundations that would drive you to become a problem solver, a thinker, a logical person, and give you the foundation to start actually the development. Then after you have solidified the CS fundamentals, we start again with the fundamentals. We never jump to React.js or jump to a framework. We must start with the fundamentals. And the fundamentals for front-end development are CSS and HTML. And the key is this. It's not enough to read a tutorial about CSS and think that we know to do something. We must understand it thoroughly. So this should be investigated thoroughly, CSS and HTML. When do you know that you know enough CSS and HTML to move to the next step? Basically, when you can take a website and replicate it by looking at it. And also in CSS and HTML, we start again with the fundamentals, with layouts, with Flexbox, with how to build simple components. So when you look at a website, there are components in the websites. No website is one big chunk. You don't just create the full chunk of the website. There is the navbar at the top, there is the navbar maybe on the side, there are forms, there are divs, there are separators, there are the fonts, the typography, and each of these is a component that by its own it's best to control before moving on to create a whole website. So we start by creating each of the components. You know great how to create a navbar, and then you know great how to create a form, and then you control the fonts, and then we go to create the full website. So after we have controlled these front-end fundamentals of CSS and HTML, we move on to the next layer. The next layer in front-end development is JavaScript. And then again, we take the same approach. We try to control the JavaScript language. We take the best book and we persist with it until we really control the language. How do we know we control the language? When we can recreate or at least understand how another library was created. And this is again some great benefit to this kind of learning, because when you learn by books or by website or by paid courses, then it's great. But the way to prove that you have learned it is either by explaining or by reading some other source code and understanding it. For example, reading the React source code and seeing that you can understand or rebuild small parts of it, very small parts. So when we have controlled JavaScript, we move on to the next stage. The next stage would be to start looking around into the backend, okay? But before we get to the backend, the best thing would be first to do some reading. This is not solidifying. Do some reading to understand how the browser works, especially the communication with the server. Then after we understood the communication with the server, we start approaching also the backend, and we approach the backend by checking out Node.js. And as the name implies, Node.js is JavaScript. And because we have already solidified JavaScript before that, then we can start creating small APIs or REST interface to assist us in the website that we are creating. So now that we have solidified the front-end and the backend, we move on to learn the next actual framework for building websites. So the framework to learn today is React. You can learn Vue, you can learn Angular, you can learn Svelte, but React is de facto number one framework. So it's best to learn this framework. And then we approach a major programming project where we combine it all with Node.js as the backend, with React as the framework, could be Next.js as another framework, and we build a website together all with this. And to nail down everything after we started with CS, front-end, JavaScript, HTML, React, we start studying new programming languages and concepts such as best be the farthest language that can be approached, like Lisp language. And because Java is so much mainstream, then it's best also to learn Java. So you see, there are a lot of things to learn here. This plan requires probably at least 1 year of learning, maybe more, maybe a few years. But this is the path to get someone into a pro level. Because if we jump, let's say, directly into React or directly into Next.js or maintaining a website, then we would probably miss a lot of the foundations, and then we would waste so much time after that. So it's not saying that we need all these components at once. It's just laying out the plan. So even if you started working and you did not work with the plan, you can lay out the plan of the CS fundamentals, the front-end, the HTML, the CSS. We are focusing on front-end developers, building small components. And then while you're working, while you're at your job, you're solidifying all your knowledge to other years. And after you have worked for a few years and on the background, you did some learning with this, then you get to a pro level. So I hope this was helpful. This was like a blueprint or a plan for a persistent developers who want to be a really good front-end developer. This plan takes time, at least 1 year, if not more. But if you have already went to college or university, then you already have the CS fundamentals. So you're already starting from the CSS and HTML parts, building small components. You have a really huge advantage. And after you finish this, you go on with this blueprint to become a front-end developer. So I think this was very interesting, and as always, see you next time.